So the patient of today is a 42-year-old man with paroxysmal atrial fibrillation. He underwent pulmonary vein isolation in 2012 with a cryo balloon. He did well for several years. Unfortunately, last year he returned back and had complaints of palpitations due to paroxysmal atrial fibrillation. He didn't want to use medication, but he wanted to go directly for redo PVI. And this is what, at the moment, where we're standing right now. So in the first procedure, it was discovered that he had a left common os that was difficult to isolate. They needed several attempts with cryoablation to get isolation. He has a large right superior pulmonary vein and a small left right inferior pulmonary vein. At this moment, we already prepared the case. We get venous access already and went on transeptal. Maybe, Rakesh, can you show them the fluoroscopy images or the Odyssey screen? Yeah, perfect. So at this point, we have two long sheets, one Agilis medium curve sheet and the AcuGuide sheet. And you can see already deployment of the basket, of the Acutus basket. And we also use the MagnaFlush ablation catheter. So at this point we want to make the anatomy. Understanding how the anatomy is built is important to know that this technique uses ultrasound to build up the anatomy. So maybe some of you are already familiar with this, but it uses 48 crystals to build up this anatomy. And you have to rotate the basket counterclockwise, clockwise to have enough information. We want to demonstrate this live, if it's possible, if you have time. Okay. So Rakesh, can you show them both the fluoroscopy and the Acutus? So if it's good, then you have the full screen now in front of you. But in this case, for the purpose of the demonstration, I will show you. So 60 degrees clockwise, 60 degrees counterclockwise. You have to make sure the basket is really in the center of the left atrium. And you see it's already building up, okay? And you see it on the Acutus screen. When we have enough points at this location, we have to change the basket to another position, okay? So you see when it gets enough information, it will turn this brown color. If it's not enough, it will stay blue. And you see that the blue parts are decreasing while I'm rotating at the same time. So now I think that I have enough information from the central part. It's not complete, of course. Towards the left pulmonary veins and keep rotating. So normally this takes a few minutes to build up this case. And I like to do it in systematic order. So first central, then left lateral, then the right-sided, septum, and then finally the mitral annulus. Hopefully you can appreciate already where's the opening on the PA view. And there's the ostium of the left common os. Okay, now I rotate. I have enough points at the left lateral. I rotate towards the right side, here. And see, it goes pretty quickly. I see at this moment the patient is become into a flutter, I see. The patient first presented in sinus rhythm, but now due to the manipulation of the catheter, he went into flutter. An interesting part is that during the first procedure, he also went into flutters. It was not mapped or attacked. So they left it alone, they cardioverted the patient. Okay, now I go to the now it's terminates.
A comment about, because it's a rigid basket, there is a safety aspect of it that is an over-the-wire system. So I think it's very important that the people know in the room.
So I will make a cinefilm. And hopefully you can appreciate that I use the wire of the SL1 sheet and it comes out. The J tip of the wire is out and that stays out the whole time. So it's 1 centimeter out of the tip, just for safety reasons. Also by deploying the basket, what I usually do, I move the AccuGuide sheet over the lasso, and the lasso is positioned in the left pulmonary veins. And I deploy it by retracting the sheet. Okay, at the same time, now, if you can see the Acutus map, you can see that's a very nice build-up of the anatomy. I look at Annelies, is that enough? Yeah, so she's fine with it. So she will enhance the images. Hopefully you can see the way she does it. I will wait for that.
Can you also explain what is the basic principle, how they do this?
Yeah, so artifacts are smoothened out, and you see that she already is making up a lot of triangles. More than 3,000 triangles are made. That is going to be used for the dipole charge activation. So every square or triangle has its own activation time. You see, she cuts out the mitral valve endless. And also at the septum is also a spot which should be smoothed out a little bit. And small indentations are taken out. This does not take a lot of time, only a few minutes just to have a nice anatomy.
So actually the mapping time was really just a few minutes, I think, that we could see it.
Can you show them where the PVs are, Annelies? Can you rotate? Okay. So hopefully you can appreciate on this view that is the PVs, a big PV left columns there, and the right-sided. So that's the bottom. It's sometimes difficult to see the real offspring of the PVs, but you can see that small stumps where they are. What we can do, we can put in the ablation catheter inside the PV and acquire additional anatomy if we would like that. If you're fine with this, then this you can also use, but sometimes we go into the PV to have a good understanding of the relationship of the ostium and the left atrial central body. Okay, but I think for now that this is fine. So we already mapped the PVs, and 2 of the 3 veins are reconnected. That is the left common os showing potentials and the right inferior pulmonary vein. The right superior vein already has entry and exit block. Wout, can you show them while you pace in the RSPV the local capture and the exit block?
It's back in Flutter.
Yeah, so hopefully you can see the Clara screen, where we have the lasso inside the right superior vein. You see nice local capture, but with exit block. Can you see that, Tomas? Okay, so that vein is fine. I think it would be nice, just for the sake of time, to make a sinus rhythm map. I think that Sabine Ernst was also already talking, so that we can learn also from the sinus rhythm maps and activation to know more about the system, especially when you're new to this system. You want to be sure that it's fitting with the activation function we already know, and this is in sinus rhythm.
And actually,
okay.
Pete always does it, and he sits here, so he will be very happy, I think. And also for the audience, it will be nice to show how it works.
Yeah. So I will stand next to Annelies so she can explain what she's doing. Otherwise, okay. Can you speak, Annelies?
Yeah. Can you people hear me? Probably yes. So I've made a recording of sinus rhythm. So we place the AccuMap catheter in the center of the chamber, and we just make a short recording of of 20 seconds. And then I actually select one of the atrial signals to make a map of. Before I make the map, I go to the stack view of all 48 electrodes on the Acutus catheter, because I want to exclude outlier signals, for example, signals that are very big, which can mean that they are actually touching the wall, and we don't want to have them in the calculation as it's a non-contact system, of course. So once I'm happy with that, I will select the atrial signal, and I will put it right in front of the QRS and then take a good offset before the atrial signal, but not too close to the T wave. And then I can make a map of this, short segment. Here I'm going to calculate the charge. So coming from the voltage, we will now calculate the actual charge. And this is a map of the dipole itself. So everything that is red is being depolarized, and everything that is pink is actually waiting to become depolarized. So I can run the map. I won't do it too quick. So you can see probably a breakout very soon, somewhere anterior. Here it comes, and then it spreads across the left atrium. Now we can also calculate the propagation history map. This means that we're going to track the leading edge of this depolarization front, and it will make it easier to follow the activation across the left atrium. So everything that we see in dark red before, the color spectrum before. So wait for it, and then you see it spreading across the posterior wall. So if you look at it again, it breaks really out here, and it will come over the roof, and it nicely conducts over the posterior wall. So that's actually the map of sinus rhythm. You see a bit of slowed.
Yeah, of course. They want to ask something, Annelies?
Yeah.
Tell me.
Pete would probably ask that in sinus rhythm, do you see any slower conducting zones in the left atrium?
Do you see slower conduction zones in the left atrium?
So I think the anterior wall, if I play it a little more slower, even you see that it slows down here, and then it kind of pivots around that point. On the posterior wall, it seems to be nicely conducting. Now, the thing that we look at for slow conduction is the closer that the color bands are together, the slower the speed of conduction is. So you can see here very nice broad bands, and anterior you can see that they're a bit more narrow, and then they tend to stop here, and then so we have to wait for it again. Here it comes. You see it slowing, and the color bands are a bit more narrow here compared to the posterior wall. So that means that probably there's some delayed conduction or slowed conduction on the anterior wall.
Maybe you can tag that part, and it would be nice to see how this part behaves during either flutter or atrial fibrillation.
Oh, sorry.
We will tag it.
I'm going to wait until it's back.
What's about the
So
part
it's
below
important
the
to
left
understand.
inferior pulmonary vein? Ask Pete.
Sorry?
What do you think about the part below the left inferior pulmonary vein? That's a question
Left
from
inferior.
Pete.
Here.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. We'll run it again, more slowly.
Good guess, Pete.
Yeah. We can mark that area as well.
Now I would like to ask the audience if anybody has questions or remarks. Not at the moment. So please, Sing, tell us what is your strategy in the next, let's say, half an hour. And then we say farewell, and then we will come back to Rotterdam later, and probably we can go to Monaco as well. Yeah.
So we're going to use this map. We're going to put in back the lasso in the left common os and see where the gaps are. We will re-isolate the left common os, and we will re-isolate the right inferior pulmonary vein. And then at that part, after we have done that, we're going to reinduce atrial fibrillation, or maybe spontaneous atrial fibrillation. And at that point, it would be nice if we come back to show you where the gaps were and what is the rotational activity or the focal activity of the irregular activity as demonstrated by the Acutus. Is that okay? And in the meantime, you can... Yes?
So is there any possibility to see the voltage map at the same time?
Sorry, it's very difficult to hear you. Can you repeat your question again? Tomas, can you repeat the question?
Can we see the voltage map?
No, with Acutus, it's not possible to see a voltage map. So that's the unfortunate. It's not like with Carter or Navix that you can have this bipolar voltage map to demonstrate the WACAs or those areas.
I have a question there. That you discussed earlier that it might be that pacing from different sides or something moving the basket or something like that. Can we identify the gap without using the lasso catheter? I would like to see that if it's possible.
So at this point, I don't think it's so accurate that we can identify the gaps based on the sinus rhythm map. But maybe Annelies, you can comment on that?
No, the question was whether you can use it for pacing.
No, I think you're completely right. For the moment, it is not possible to make a true substrate map. We can only make relative substrate maps, but those are completely dependent on the position of the AccuMap catheter in the chamber. But in future software releases, we will have new opportunities and new algorithms that will provide us with a true substrate map in the chamber of interest.
So in the meantime, there was a question about the pacing, so I can answer that as well. This is, of course, a non-contact map, and Acutus will introduce a contact mapping, and at that time you will be able to pace. But at this moment, we don't pace with this basket.
Yeah.
That's probably possible, but I'm not sure that it's more accurate than a lasso catheter in my view. Pete has a comment on this.
So I can comment. We've done some where we've looked at sinus rhythm, and then, for instance, we've paced from the coronary sinus catheter, paced from the ablation catheter in the left atrial appendage. So to try and look at these areas of differential conduction when you're pacing with the wavefronts coming from different directions, right? So it's early on, but I think that's a very good idea.
Yeah. And Peter, are you satisfied with the spatial resolution of the Acutus when doing this?
You know, I think that it will continue to improve, but I think, yes, we're actually seeing good representation. You know, it looks a little different than what we're used to seeing, right, when you see a cardo map.
Yeah.
But the reality is that it is high density, and so I think, yes, I've been pretty impressed with how that goes.
Okay. Thank you.
We have one more question, Sing, just for 1 second.
We were discussing about the V-drive earlier. It would be nice to see the robotic doing everything that use the V-drive to rotate the basket and get all the information without touching the catheter in the lab.
Indeed, it's an important question, and of course, we all have to decide whether it's an important feature or not to implement in the future.
Tomas, can you repeat the questions for me? Difficult.
No, it was not really a question. It was more a comment, so you can just go ahead, I think.
Okay.
But there is one question. It's really the last one.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible to put the basket into the os of the pulmonary veins and make registration from there?
I will answer this myself. So,
yeah.
If you understand the basic philosophy of this whole system, it's unnecessary. I mean, this is not contact mapping, this is non-contact mapping, and of course it picks up far field from the whole atrium. So it's a global map, and that's why probably the pacing is not the best idea. I mean, it may work, but not necessary, because so when you pace somewhere, and you see here an activation, this is a sum of the activation that this non-contact mapping picks up from everywhere. So for instance, here is the appendage with its 2 layers that's overlapping, of course, in terms of electrical mass activity, the pulmonary vein as well. So it will never be on this way more accurate than actually putting a lasso in. And that's why it's a very important development for the future that Acutus comes also with contact mapping. So I think just to be effective now we really have to go to Monaco, and thanks Sing, and just go ahead, we will come back in 30 minutes.
Perfect, okay, thank you. So what we did, we re-isolated the left common os. Can you show them the before ablation? Can you see the Claris, Thomas? Yeah, hopefully you can see that the lasso is positioned in the left common os. And you see the nice signals over there with the earliest activation around 15, 16. You see the point of the ablation 1, 2, see the nice signals. I have to be honest, I already ablated a little bit in this area. So Wout, can you walk through that? Nee, hier doorheen gaan, scrollen. So we go starting ablation, still the signals there, and now it's prolonging a little bit, now it's gone, there. You can see it's isolated.
Yes, very nicely, thank you.
Okay, then we have a PV ectopy, yes. Here's a PV ectopy with exit block from the common ostium. So we waited around 10 minutes and then we switch over to the right inferior pulmonary vein. That's where we are now at this position. Can you see the fluoro, Thomas? Okay, so what we like to do when we go to the right inferior pulmonary vein or the right PVs, we like to use this shape of the Agilis medium sheet. With this way we can have a very stable position of the ablation catheter for the right-sided PV.
Yes, thank you. So just think for 1 second, I really would like to emphasize this. If you want to be effective on the right side, I tried for years not to do this. You can manage it sometimes, many times it's a struggle. Once you introduce this curve and you change your method, it's always easier than the left side. So that we highly recommend this to everybody. Doesn't matter how you do. I think it's fantastic to do with the V-drive as well, with the steerable sheet of Stereotaxis, or currently we use the Acutus sheet.
Yeah.
Yes?
Okay. So Thomas, during pacing, we could see that the earliest activation was at the lasso, I would say 9, 10, 11, 12. Maybe you can see that ablation catheter has a very nice signal over there. Maybe even better on 3, 4. It makes sense, huh? So we're going to try to re-isolate the right inferior pulmonary vein using the following settings. I prefer the posterior wall to use 45 watts, 20 flow, 43 degrees. Any comments on the settings?
Can I ask you something? Probably if I don't do, somebody else would do that. When you look at ablation 1, 2, and ablation 3, 4, you see on ablation 3, 4 is a nice near-field atrial signal, while on ablation 1, 2 is more far-fieldish and it's a very sharp PV signal. So my question is, isn't it too deep at this moment for the ablation? Maybe it's wise just to move slightly out to
slightly
avoid...
back.
Or it's already done, actually.
Like this, yeah. I think this is a nice position. We are not so deep. We have...
No, for sure, not extremely.
Maybe the ostium side, you see? And also it fits with the anatomy of Acutus. So I prefer this spot.
So this is a very big advantage of the Acutus, if I make also a comment on this for the audience, because it's a real anatomy, ultrasound based, you can much better define the ostium of the pulmonary veins. because when you use an electroanatomical system, it's always the decision of the operator where you think it is. Okay.
Yeah, maybe you can also appreciate from our Acutus map that I did performed a little bit extra anatomy of the PV, as you can see, just to have a clear identification of the ostium. Okay, so let's start ablation here. Ablation.
So just to make it clear, with this system, you can also make a kind of FEM-like extra map. So you have the basics with an ultrasound, but you can add the FEM-like electroanatomical map.
I would like to ask a question about the visualization of the catheter on the map, because I have seen sometimes with Carto that the catheter looks very stable. But if you look at the X-ray, it's moving a lot. How is it with the Acutus system? Because it looks like it's moving a little.
Annelies, hoor je me of niet? Dan zit ik bij 19, is mijn vraag.
Yeah, the question is, it's philosophical, which is more accurate? I think probably if you filter too much out all of the movements, that's also less accurate. But I mean, we did only a few cases, so I cannot really comment on this, what the current... and that's, at this moment, not the major focus of me to check this, because it's not limiting us in isolating those veins.
And I think it's deceiving, of course, because your Carto map and your Acutus map are not moving, but of course the heart is. And so when you're seeing the catheter tip moving along with seeing the coronary sinus catheter, et cetera, that's actually real, movement. It's artificial that the map is holding still, and it's real that the catheters are moving, if it makes sense. Yeah. The other comment I was going to make is that you don't see a lot of distal vein anatomy, but I don't know that matters. Right? And I think we're so used to creating these very detailed maps, including a lot more distal vein anatomy with the other systems, but the reality is you want to be ablating in the antrum anyway, right?
Exactly.
And so even though the first impression is that you're sort of seeing this more blob-like anatomy, the reality is that it is real, and it's also not being altered by pushing out with a contact catheter, and that the anatomy that matters, which is the antrum, is actually present. And so if you're ablating in that anatomy, you're also not likely too deep in the vein.
Yep. And what is also interesting, that the anatomy is actually not depending on the skills of the operator. It more depends on the anatomy itself. This one is a very beautiful one. So you are not always able to see so nicely the antrum. But in this patient, I agree with Pete. It's really great.
So we isolated all PVs, the left common os and the right inferior pulmonary vein. We rechecked. Maybe you can see Claris, Thomas, or not?
Yes. We actually
so there was
everything right now.
Yeah. Still PV ectopy with exit block. After that, we changed the lasso for the Acutus basket. We induced atrial fibrillation. It was really tough. So not really worked. We could not induce any AFib. So we did really high frequency burst spacing, and then you can. It was non-sustained. So in the end, we had 3 AFib induced, with a duration of around 30 seconds. We can show you the maps.
And all of them terminated?
Yeah, spontaneous termination with like this, as you can see in the Claris. So this was the first time it stopped. Show me the second one. You had a spontaneous AFib here.
Yeah. So you had this flutter.
You can see just one PAC.
Sing, you have this flutter kind of rhythm at the beginning. Did you see that later on as well?
No.
Or you never?
No.
Never.
No flutterish like or atrial fibrillation. It starts with PAC, I think in the lower region, CS7-8 first. I think it's not right-sided, but more left-sided. And then this also stopped after 40 seconds here. It becomes more regular and then it stops. Then we induce high frequency bursting, and also stop. Volgende. Spontaneous without any regularization, but it stopped as well. So this happened a few times. So he didn't have long episode duration of atrial fibrillation. During this 30 seconds, we could acquire a map, chopper corner. So looking at this, we all know this driver theory is very dynamic. It depends on the duration of recording, of course, and which segments you take. If you look at this, can anyone about seeing this charge density mapping, propagation history mapping?
Yeah, we see it. We lose sometimes your voice, actually. And I think, just to summarize it, I think the basic idea was to show to everybody how this system works. So that was one of the idea. And the other, we really wanted to show the integration. And now we see the mapping, but in a live case, it is very important what happens with the patient, of course. I have my own opinion, but I let you to tell you what is your strategy right now.
So based on the fact that the patient have paroxysmal atrial fibrillation, I already went across the left atrium to see if there's any areas of low voltage was also not present. The fact that the induced and spontaneous atrial fibrillation always stop within 30 seconds. And we cannot see any interesting patterns which we could target. I would say we stop with only after the re-isolation of the two PVs.
Completely agree. Just one more nasty question, last one. During these short periods, do you see something at the region where you had in sinus rhythm the slow conduction?
Yeah, so that's the area we looked at. So the two areas, one area was anteriorly. There was only this LIA, this irregular activity, but that was not consistent. We made several maps, and it was not very consistent. The second area was the area beneath the left pulmonary vein, as mentioned by one of you guys, but that was not came up at all at any map as an interesting area to target. So yeah, I also look at the anterior part, but that was also, yeah, looks great. I don't think we should make substrate for re-entry in this patient.
Yeah, we all agree, and Sabine said the same thing. We would like to congratulate you and thanks for this great case.